complete outrage, where China is poisoning America's children, poisoning our teenagers, poisoning our young people. How long are you going to let this go on?
Congresswoman, let me assure you that we're not letting it go on. We are fighting this.
No, I reclaim my time. You're a liar.
So in making a ruling on this, it's pretty clear that the rules state you can't impugn someone's character. Identifying or calling someone a liar is unacceptable in this committee. And I make the ruling that we strike those words.
My understanding is if words are taken down, that means that the member can no longer speak in whatever the proceeding is that those words were said.
Personal inquiry, point of personal inquiry.
There's no such thing.
That actually ended up being the moment that got Congresswoman Marjorie Greene and her ridiculous statements silenced during a GOP-led House Homeland Security Committee hearing. So that led to calls by Democratic lawmakers to essentially take down her remarks, which is different from striking her remarks from the record, and I'll tell you how in just a moment. The Democrat who moved to take down her remarks was Congressman Benny Thompson, and Greene's comments did in fact violate House rules. Look, I'm not one of these people who's like obsessed with decorum and like, oh, you must be, all buttoned up and decorum is so important. But she was out of line during that hearing, not just in her interaction with Mayorkas, but also in her interaction with Democratic lawmaker Eric Swalwell. The House chair for this committee is Republican Mark Green. So Mark Green said this: it's pretty clear that the rules state that you can't impugn someone's character. Identifying or calling someone a liar is unacceptable in this committee, and I make the ruling that we strike those words. And so Representative Dan Goldman, who's a Democrat from New York, then noted that Benny Thompson's motion to take down Greene's remarks, not strike them, taking them down would essentially end Greene's ability to question Mayorkas further. The committee did just that. Greene was not kicked out of the hearing, but she was prohibited from speaking further. So look, asking tough questions of a secretary of a major department like the Department of Homeland Security, no problem with that. But throwing out accusations, calling him a liar, placing the blame on Mayorkas for the fentanyl crisis that we're dealing with in the country right now is not only inaccurate, it does break the House rules. And the reason why I say it's inaccurate is because, no, the Department of Homeland Security doesn't have an open border policy where they're like, everybody bring in the fentanyl. We love watching Americans die on our streets. That is not what's happening. And that is what Marjorie Greene is making it seem like.
Yeah, no, I disagree a little bit. So I think she's unhinged. Of course, I agree with that. You're definitely right about the border. The guy's about to say his policy, right? And he's like, no, shut up, you're a liar. Let me tell you what your policy is. It's to let fentanyl from China in. We don't have a border with China. Anyway, long story, bottom line is, no, we don't have an open border policy. Ironically, she's the one lying about it. Okay, now having said that, I think the House rules are BS. You can't call someone a liar. Why? Because they're all liars, and so they don't want to be called liars. So they set a rule saying, well, we're gonna ban you from calling us liars. They're politicians, almost all of them are liars, including Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Right.
So I just don't believe in that decorum. If I was there, I'd be calling them liars 24/7.
I think my issue isn't necessarily with her calling him a liar, right? Like I care way less about that. What I do care about is seeing lawmakers, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, I don't care, using these hearings specifically for their little performances and spreading disinformation through their little performances, right? Yeah. Because it is, look, they all know what they're doing. These hearings are never meant to actually accomplish anything. I think you guys know that at this point. How many hearings have we talked about? Even hearings that have been called upon by Democratic lawmakers, even progressives. And it's always their moment for a soundbite that might go viral on social media, and then it'll give you the illusion that they're actually doing something to fight for you, when in reality they're doing nothing. So they use these hearings to make a name for themselves, to go viral, whatever. And in this case, Marjorie Greene is spreading lies through her little performative actions.
Yeah, but instead of complaining about it, if I was a Democrat on the other side, I'd be like, well, the gentlewoman from Georgia is a giant liar. And let me explain why there is no open border policy, and she has lied about it hundreds of times. So she's 10,000 times the liar than anybody else is. But but that's fighting fire with fire, and Democrats would never do that. Look, guys, on the performative stuff, I have a slightly different take on it. So Anna's right. There's no question that they're using it for PR to get their names bigger. Republicans do it, Democrats do it.
Everyone does it.
Right, and then they raise, by the way, the corporate guys don't do it much because they don't need the funds. They just get bribes from corporations. It's actually, honestly, progressives and extreme right that do it more. Okay, I'm being real with you guys. And by the way, one of the reasons they do that is because it raises a lot of money. Okay, so when you're seen as fighting the other side, you get grassroots money. And to be fair to a guy like Matt Gaetz, he doesn't take corporate PAC money, so he needs to do that more to get grassroots funding, okay? So that has set up a perverse incentive to put on the biggest clown show, okay? But the part that I want to draw your attention to on how it could be different is you can use those performances to put a spotlight on an issue and be incredibly effective. But what's so frustrating is that no one does that. So the right way to do it, for example, if you're a progressive in Congress, is to make a giant big stink and use some bad words, yell at a Republican, yell at a fellow Democrat, and then say about, for example, paid family leave. And then scream to everyone, 84% of the country wants it. Why won't these crooks pass it? Because they work for corporate donors and they're liars, right? That'll get a lot of attention. And then people will go, huh, paid family leave polls at 84%. 3/4 of Republican voters agree with it. Why aren't they passing it? That would be an effective way to use quote unquote performance, right? But no one does that. They only do it to build up their own reputations and to raise more money. And that's why we're all sick of politics.